Week 14's here, and here's a few kickers. I'm going to start this week. The first guy's Ryan Succop of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Succop, he had a bye week, obviously, this week in Week 13, but now Week 14, the byes are over. Him and the Tampa Bay Bucks versus the Minnesota Vikings. I give up the fourth most fantasy points to kickers, and Succop, he's been pretty solid the last month or two with double-digit fantasy points in 2 out of his last 4 games. And now, here we go. He's got Minnesota, like I said. They give up the fourth most fantasy points to kickers. And Succop, he's out there in 69% of fantasy leagues. So he's a guy, he could have a lot of opportunities in this game. I think this game will be a pretty high-scoring game. And I think Succop, he could get double digits for you. So he's the first kicker I'm going to start. The second guy is Rodrigo Blankenship of the Indianapolis Colts. Blankenship, he's been pretty good this season, except he had a little hiccup in the middle weeks of the year. But now Blankenship, he's been solid. He's been hitting his field goals, and he's getting the attempts. This Indianapolis Colt team, they've been scoring at a decent pace now the last few months. And Rodrigo Blankenship at Vegas this week, they give up the 16th most fantasy points to kickers. Another indoor game for him. He's kicking well, like I said, and I like the matchup where the Colts, they're going to have opportunities as well to score. So I think Rodrigo, he could get anywhere from 7 to 10 fantasy points in this game, and he's a guy that won't disappoint. The third kicker I'm going to start is Dustin Hopkins of the Washington Redskins football team. He's a guy I said this week to pick up on the waiver wire, and he's been having a great fantasy season this year, especially the last 4 games for Hopkins. He's really got into his own 9, 8, 11, and 14 fantasy points. And this week he versus the San Francisco 49ers, which this game will be played in Arizona. So it's an indoor game for Hopkins. He's going to get opportunities, I believe, because this Washington team, they're struggling in the red zone. So they're going to have to settle for field goals. And I think that'll be the same thing again this week for Hopkins and the Washington football team. So I think Hopkins, he'll get probably 7 to 10 points as well in double digits. And he's a guy available in 98% of fantasy leagues. So if you want a different kicker or something, this is a good matchup. And this is a guy who's been hitting his field goals. So look into Hopkins. The fourth kicker I'm going to start this week, Kacey Fairbairn of the Houston Texans. Fairbairn, he's been pretty solid most of the season. And this week he's got a decent matchup in Chicago. Just the only thing, hopefully it's not windy and the field's not in bad condition. But now 2 out of his last 3 ball games, he's got double-digit fantasy points. He's Kacey Fairbairn. And now after this week, the next 3 out of his 4 games are going to be indoors. So Fairbairn last week versus Indy, he hit a 35-yarder, hit a 52-yarder. He missed a 54 and hit 2 extra points. So Fairbairn, he's getting opportunities. The Texans, they're pretty decent offense, and a team that has a lot of opportunities as well. And this game versus Chicago, I think will be in the low 20s. So I could see Fairbairn getting 2 or 3 opportunities and having a decent fantasy game. And the 5th and final kicker I'm starting this week is Gano with the New York Giants. Gano, he's been pretty solid now the last few weeks. Last week it was a little bit of a down week for him versus Seattle, because missing that extra point. But before that, in Week 9, he had 13 versus Washington. Week 10, 10 versus Philly. And Week 12, where he had the huge fantasy game, 15 fantasy points. And now this week versus Arizona in MetLife Stadium. The Giants, I think they're going to be settling for a few field goal attempts, even with Daniel Jones in the lineup. I think this game's going to be low scoring, kind of, in a way. This Giant front seven's been playing well, so they're going to try to slow the game down, be conservative, and I think could reach double digits once again this week versus Arizona, who gives up the 7th most fantasy points to kickers, and he's also available in 93% of fantasy leagues. So that's 5 kickers I'm going to start here heading into Week 14.